Hey, I just did something stupid while I was talking about stupid. A mistake, an error. I clicked the button to stop the video instead of to start the video on this video. I was supposed to be starting the video I was going to play, and when I was supposed to hit the button to play the video. Well, anyway, um, well, you probably get what I mean without me being precise about exactly the error I made. See, I just made an error in describing, you know, in a perfect form, in a most concise and well-formed form. I failed to do that. Okay, and that's exactly what chaos does to function. It just turns something that would have been functional into crap. So neither my behavior nor my sentence was anywhere close to perfectly functional, and it's clearly just because of bits of error code that didn't advance the circumstance at all. They just degrade from the circumstance. They make a negative contribution. So, in the previous video that I just now didn't finish, I was kind of getting to the point that this conversation between Jordan Peterson and TJ, in the sense of it's an exchange of ideas, not in person, and there's no Peterson point of view included, any relevant one, besides a paraphrase of he's just saying, when I don't even think that's what he's saying. He's just giving people some weapons against what they perceive to be chaos. He's not saying you can get rid of chaos. He's saying here's a way to fix it. And so this whole thing doesn't mean anything because he's not defending chaos. He's not attacking chaos. I'm sure he would attack chaos as a solution. I'm sure he would say not cleaning your room can't possibly help. No one would give somebody the advice, don't clean your room, it'll make everything work out fine. Don't tie your shoes, everything will work out fine. Now, whether telling somebody to tie their shoes and clean their room is going to fix chaos or fix their life, that's the point. These are silly solutions, like the apple a day. It really isn't going to fix if you ate 4 donuts for breakfast. Okay, the apple isn't going to cure 4 donuts. So, these little happyisms about how to live a good life, these trivialisms, are not going to fix our substantial social problems. They're just not even come close. They're trivial and childishly silly. If everybody stands up straight, everything's going to be okay. It really won't. So Peterson is dead in the water because his point of view is immature, simplistic, and completely disconnected from the complexity, the real complexity of living on planet Earth with a bunch of other maggots and being a maggot while you're doing it. And then this idiot's response, the yang to that insensibly stupid yin, is this wrong perception that he's anti-chaos when he's not, and some sort of knee-jerk defense of something as stupid as don't plan what you're doing, don't learn how to play the piano before you play it. Like that works. Like somehow some of the greatest songs ever written were written by people who didn't know how to read music and didn't know how notes should be put together, and they were just going bang, 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 bang on like a cat. A cat wrote some of the best music in history. No, it really didn't. And it's a really low probability source of anything valuable. And the high probability source of valuable is intelligence and thoughtfulness and order and structure, not lack of structure. So this whole argument is beneath any human being's useful consumption. And here I am, yes, reporting on it. But I'm reporting on its uselessness, so let's not understand. I do recognize I'm just describing a pile of shit. This really will not do anything in the world at all. This is all useless against dysfunctional. And it has nothing to do with anything that is relevant besides me speaking Japanese or something.
each of them would be within the order of nature. It wasn't until mankind arrived on the scene and began using their big brains,
Alright, let's understand they always had,
which once again,
it had nothing to do with the size of their brain, so that's a false little piece of knowledge, like we only use 1% of our brain or 7% or whatever. Those are all little just urban legend kind of things. They just really aren't the truth. Now, the fact is we do have a bigger brain by proportion to our body size, but that's not really what made us really smart. Okay, so did Cro-Magnon man, so did all the humanoids varieties. They all had big brains, but they were obviously really fucking dumb. So it's really the size of our brain wasn't the key. The key was the part where we started being able to acquire language, where we started to be able to acquire enough words. So I could use the example of Coco the gorilla. Coco does sign language, but they theorize that she's not really doing it right. She's just doing it reflexively. She's not really doing it as a language, because it's kind of like the Helen Keller thing. Helen Keller learned to do signs, but nobody could really communicate with her. She was just mimicking signs. She didn't know they meant something. They represented things in the real world. And there was a moment where, with the word water, she all of a sudden realized that it was a thing. It might have been tree. Well, it doesn't really matter. I think it was water. But anyway, the point is, there was that point where she realized that the symbol meant the thing, and the language then was rich, and now she could be fully human. And the same thing happened to humans. So, I mean, it's almost beneath the dignity of having a conversation about those kinds of things in the context of such a stupidly premised argument. But it's language. So I'm just pointing out that this talk about our big brains, having a big brain isn't enough. You have to have a good language, you have to know what words actually mean, and then you have to spend a lot of time learning all the complex relationships between those words. And it's sort of like a mechanical science of some kind. There's lots to learn about the language of that science, and the relationships of that science, and the mechanics of that science. And there's no easy road to that knowledge. There's no lazy chaos road to being intelligent.
and evolved by climbing the ladder of chaos to repurpose these natural elements into something unpredictable. Cave walls became canvases.
So again, he's making an argument. He already did this, so he is being awful redundant. They didn't become canvases in some disordered way. They became canvases in a very ordered way. So again, they weren't spitting on the wall and saying, pretty, pretty. That wasn't happening. They were being deliberate, making deliberate symbols that had deliberate meaning and constructed meaning. And clearly we became better artists with time. They would have loved if they could have painted as well as, Rembrandt.
Dirt, charcoal, spit, and fat became paint, and humankind began to express itself through representational art.
Yes, and expressing itself not by just farting on the wall. Again, they didn't do something chaotic on the wall. So again, this isn't a proper defense of chaos. You can't allow chaos to wear. You can't put the chaos shirt, like a Nike symbol, on this because it's fake. This isn't a real Nike.
This was chaos. It was not the predictable. It was not the way things had always been.
Okay, this is not the predictable. Of course it was perfectly predictable if you had the knowledge to understand that, of course, this is what brains may be able to do. So once there's vocabulary, it's exceedingly predictable that people, generations, would learn how to do different things because, once they had the leisure to do it. And leisure was hugely important in the early development of human science, because you actually had time to play around with stuff, to mess around. So there's a clear there's an understandable progression, and there's tons of scientists that spent their whole life studying those rational, logically deducible progressions. Even that is a complex science in and of itself. And so, again, having nothing to do with anything chaotic. No disorder, order. Ordered steps. It's just like growing up. It's an ordered process. You don't go to college when you're 5 years old.
Was not hitherto part of the established order. When Jordan Peterson defined order in part...
So that's just a bizarre way to talk about change rather than to talk about chaos, and to try to make the two the same thing, and they're not the same thing. Yes, human beings evolved. They changed from the previous version of Minky, but the change was clearly dictated by the idea that you survived better, that you were somehow improved in terms of your fighting and flighting ability. And so it really has nothing to do with a chaotic improvement. It has to do with a value component that was recognized. And if we could make that process more efficient, we would, because obviously the process by which those improvements took place actually brutalized an awful lot of organisms. And for every improvement there was 1,000 or 10,000 degrades, and those degrades had to suffer the consequences of being degraded, which likely wasn't pleasant.
As being the predictable. He was making a bold admission about what chaos really is. Something new. Something that upsets that order.
Right, so it's just a book about how to deal with the fact that life changes and that life has jerks in it. And again, you could go back to like the Grapes of Wrath or something. The mother gives a little jerk speech. Life's a bunch of jerks. You get jerked and jerked and jerked, and he does the whole thing about how women's is more capable of taking all the jerks, but the men's, they ain't too good with this jerky stuff. So Peterson's offering nothing new. Even the mother in Grapes of Wrath was mother was more sensible in her general philosophy than I'd say Peterson is. But both of them were way too optimistic about the fact that we can fix some of these fundamental obstacles we're banging our head against. There's much of life you can't fix. The fact that we have to choose addictions, and that those addictions have to be somehow compatible with not being a complete menace to our fellow boaters. Blah, 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 blah.
And just as genetic mutations can be neutral, beneficial, or harmful, so too can...
Well, again, the vast majority of them will be not beneficial. The vast majority, huge percentage, by huge numbers, decidedly unbeneficial. So again, chaos is a terrible master on the plantation, because it wastes so much suffering to get one piece of good behavior from the slaves. It's so retarded in how it structures the environment. So much friction. Tiny, tiny, tiny bit of function as a result. It's the worst way to do something. Chaos is the worst medicine for any disease. And I just can't believe somebody would waste anyone's time trying to argue otherwise, because it's just plain wrong as fuck.
All the creations of chaos. I personally think that painting is a wonderful example of beneficial chaos.
Oh, so it's just, that's what they've turned art into, right? So we know that painting originally had nothing to do with anything creative. It had entirely to do with skill. You weren't doing something you were attempting to render reality, okay, an image of reality, and you needed rendering skills. You didn't need to do creative things to the participants in the paintings. Then clearly once they got some proficiency, that became interesting to put, a naked turkey or something on top of the king's head. And so all of a sudden now they could be creative. They could put little hidden stories inside the painting. They could have 4 paintings in one painting. They could do things. But again, all of that creativity was completely contrived, not by any chaos, but by understanding what a good joke is. You don't make a good joke by being chaotic. You have to be very ordered in your thinking to make a really good joke. George Carlin didn't use chaos to make jokes. I mean, it's just so stupid to think that there's anything that now he's calling chaos creativity. It's just so maliciously insulting to the work it takes to be creative.
It was something that rewrote the rules of reality in an unforeseeable way that bucked the established pattern of the world. And thanks to it, we have Van Gogh's Starry Night and Clint.
Yeah, well, again, so now he's applauding the subjective icons of something. And now isn't that another offense to the fact that you're supposed to be making a logical argument, and now you're just going to use a culturally bent subjective definition of accomplishment? Clearly Van Gogh's are technically pretty shitty paintings. Now the subject matter of some of the Van Goghs is really good in that he picked things that usually artists never rendered. But, it's purely subjective to say this art created something big. Yes, it's big for people who like colors, but it's not big for people who are subjectively attached to refinement and not jagged edges. I mean, it's like cutting dolls out of paper and ripping dolls out of paper. Some people can tell the difference. And kind of the imbeciles like the cheap version. Like most people like the refined version.
The Kiss and Picasso's Guernica and so on.
I don't think Picasso's anything is worth looking at, but fine, whatever. Subjective bullshit. Can't be possible that proves a point.
All that which is new to this world and which could not have been predicted by precedent is a form.
Again, to say anything about the human race couldn't be predicted is just, I think, silly. Because we're really not doing a dance that's all that fancy. We're doing a hokey pokey. And it's clear we're dictated by reflexes, we get addicted, we do have these cultural biases that are, and all this subjectivity, and you can see it in the, our clothes fads change, and we have this generational gapping process that takes place merely because one generation has to separate itself from the others. And so the change isn't because something they did was wrong, it's just that they have to do something different. So once you use up the really cool colors for your gang, right, you're the reds and you're the blacks and you're the greens and the blues, then all of a sudden you run out of colors, right, and then now you have to start being the puces, and the Vilverines, or some other kind of bullshit. So you're all out of the cool colors. So it's not very constructive for change for the sake of change. You should just accept that I can be red and they can be reds.
Of chaos. And just as life has benefited from the continued meddling of chaos, so
you could be the redders. Yeah. The reddists. Yeah. You don't have to give up on the color. Sorry.
so too has art. We aren't still painting on cave walls. We've moved past even the need for a physical canvas and paints, thanks to softwares like Adobe Photoshop.
Okay, so Photoshop's going to come to the rescue. We don't need to worry about our culture or our civilization. Everybody can be a lazy jack-off who just sits there and smokes dope all day, because we really don't have any problems that can't be solved by Photoshop. What is the argument here? This is an insanely stupid argument. He's talking about really sophisticated tools, completely not made out of any chaos, and using them to make it easier for us to create order, for us to impose order. Oh, amazing.
Carrel painter and a slew of others. And who knows what new leaps in visual art will stun us in the future.
Yes, we will leap into the visual art super singularity. It'll be so spectacular. They'll be visually all over the place. A complete jizz master of visual art. You know, it's like little kids, like little, oh, pretty beard, little flashy pictures and stuff. What is this? Visual art to the rescue. No, it's not going to save anybody. I am an artist, quote unquote, and yes, maybe I'm some sort of self-hating artist or something, but I mean, I just don't buy into this mush that art is anything else but a kind of wank. I mean, it's not going to save humanity.
Technology is always improving. Human beings are still up to their old tricks of taking that which exists in one form and repurposing it into something new, something that defies the extant...
Right, yeah, well, we've repurposed our garbage into animal traps, you know, so, you know, things to kill animals. You know, I just, you know, what's, you know, hey, DDT turned out to be a bird repellent. You know, cool. Kills more stuff than we thought. You know, we're repurposing. What? Instead of, fixing the hole in the couch, you stick a piece of styrofoam in the hole. What do you, oh, I repurposed that styrofoam cup. I put it in that cigarette burn hole. Cool. Thanks. Everything's fine now then, I guess, right? Yeah, I feel fine. You feel fine. Yeah, everything must be fine then. Huh.
Order, something inherently and magically chaotic. Sometimes the new creations are not useful and they fade away benignly. Other times they're beneficial and become...
And again, so this huge false premise that art is created by chaos, when none of the artists were chaotic people. It just doesn't work that way. All the good art took hard work to develop the skill to create it. None of it came out of chaos. It came out of ordered processing.
Incorporated into a new order, or at least, you know, until they're replaced by some new radical departure from the norm. Brought to you once again by our good friend Chaos. But if chaos
Did you hear him again? He just said, it's brought to you by chaos. Somehow, fine art is brought to you by chaos. And even the Van Gogh example, he struggled for years to find a technique. He went and studied other artists to see if their technique could mean something to him. There was absolutely nothing about it that was chaotic in that sense, in the sense of his acquisition of his function. His function was through deliberate comparisons and deliberate refinements. Oy.
Our friend, then why does it have such a shabby reputation? All of us have said during a tumultuous time that, you know, my life is in chaos right now. If a room is messy and it's not functional, we say sheepishly to a friend who sees it, oh, I'm sorry, my room's in chaos right now.
And it's true. I mean, it's just obviously true. I mean, if there's dog shit on your shoe is having a chaos moment. It's not functioning properly. It's, you know, the form is out of form. Form is good. Form connected to function. Those are connected things. The wheel is the right amount of roundness. That's good. Flat is the... No, I don't need that chaos part.
If people are rioting in the streets and violence is breaking out and fires are being set and cars are being flipped and
Yeah, well, all that's just not a good thing. I just don't know how any imbecile could say, "Hey, that really helps." That, everything works out just fine after that, because then they just throw a bunch of brown people in jail and everything works out just great. So what's the problem? I
bedlam is broken out in every conceivable way, we are apt to describe the situation with the word chaos. And in none of those examples are we misusing the word. All of these situations are, in fact, chaos. And it's this chaos that Jordan Peterson likely sees his book as being the antidote to.
Yes, any kind of negative circumstance that wastes our potential. Now that's his theme, but clearly, again, you're not going to save our potential. You're not going to. It's not a bucket to refine us or improve us. This is too dull a knife for the job. You can't sculpt with this spoon. It's too simplistic, too crude a tool to get to the fundamental problems that human beings have to overcome. God is not the answer, nor are his simple-minded fables. They just won't work.
Peterson has developed a catchphrase of sorts that has resonated and caught on with many of the disenfranchised people who have come to him. Clean your room, bucko! Clean!
Yes, there was pull up your bootstraps back in my day, and I'm sure there was some, and there wasn't even bootstraps anymore, so we kind of really held on to that one for a long time, right? That one probably goes all the way back to like cowboys or something, and, and they still used it, Oh, pull up your, quit whining and pull up your bootstraps and shit, Quit being a pussy. So yes, so we have new words to say, quit being a pussy. And you'll do the same damn thing. You have your own little bootstrap statements. Quit being one of them whiny SJWs or something, some kind of bullshit like that. So you're just doing the same kind of authoritarian bullshit where you're saying, I know how to live. How come you fucktards don't do it right? I know how to steal money from people. Why don't you just steal some money from people? Why don't you dupe the dumb masses? It's working for me. I mean, hypocrite much.
In your room! Such a simple phrase. The same kids who likely ignored it when it came from their parents are now championing it as great philosophical wisdom now that it comes to them from Peter.
But we know who's doing that, and who's doing that is basically your kind of audience, okay? A bunch of simple-minded morons looking for simple answers. So again, it's Trumpites. I mean, not that your audience is Trumpites, but I just mean clearly they're not very bright. Clearly the human race is not very bright. So yes, they're falling for just reformed jargon. But I could argue they've fallen for incredibly silly things. The multiverse. This word should be, like, every time people hear it, it should be hilarious. What do you know? The multiverse. What are you talking about? What are you on drugs? What the fuck are you talking about, silly people?
And here is what it means, according to Peterson in an interview with ABC Comedy's Tonightly with Tom Ballard.
If you're going to fix complicated problems, you have to learn how to fix simple problems first. Then you get good at it. I'm not...
Okay, so that's maybe, yeah, that's right. If you want to play the piano, first play the, I don't know, two-stick thing or something, or I don't know. There's probably a fact somewhere in that there probably is, walk a big giant, walk on a sidewalk, and then work your way up to tight ropes. That kind of thing. Probably right. But, again, just totally useless because we're way late for that. We got to do some really fancy shit really quick, and we really don't have time to start with sidewalks. We got to take the advanced course. Hurry up and get smart. We can't do the take your time and get smart.
Saying that young people don't have things to be concerned about because life is a concern, right? I mean, life is a fatal disease. It's a concern. You're not on top of...
Right, exactly. It's a fatal disease. Oh, fuck that. Oh, I just shot myself in the lower regions. Let's see. Should be where there's Jordan Peterson in the image, right? Come on, it's got to be in here somewhere. It can't be that hard to find. You're a fucktard.
Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and their control.
We haven't
Black
got to that
people
yet.
in America, mid-20th century.
Oh, okay, there
You don't know the first thing about them. Disease.
Ah, there we go.
And here is what it means.
There's always more challenge than you can take on in some sense. But complaining about the structure of being and attempting to reorganize massive social structures, especially when you don't know the first thing about them, which is generally the case.
Right, so that's the real, I've described this problem. There's a bunch of humans walking around thinking they're way, with this high impression of their qualifications. They make comments as if they know something about a subject. They're just so willing to give their completely non-expert, imbecile opinion and chime in, and they're completely incompetent. And the only way they get away with that shit is because there's no obvious repercussions. They're not directly related to their act, and so there's no obvious reward and punishment. But yeah, that's how something like the Titanic decision of let's sail on the Trump boat, you know, the SS Trump, you know, all those imbeciles should be spanked for the consequence. They're going to the future brokenness that we're going to have to fix because of that poor decision.
Is just not advisable. And the universities, you know, they teach young kids, young people, 19, 20 years old, that they should be out attempting to rectify massive social organizations. It's like, you wouldn't go and try to fix a cruise ship. You know, things are complicated. You can't set your own room in order.
Yes, things are complicated, but this metaphor to a room in order doesn't make any sense, because obviously people who could handle very complex tasks, like Einstein or something, didn't give a shit about personal order in their life, okay? They just couldn't care less whether their fucking shirt was ironed, or this was right, or my buttons are lined up correctly, or my shoes are tied. It just wasn't relevant to the skill he was valuable for having. So again, this idea that we have to do it your retarded way, you know, I have to clean my room first before I can unify physics. Well, that's complete rubbish.
You can't set your own family, your life in order. What the hell makes you think you're ready to take on something like the political system?
I mean, frankly, the political system is a lot less complicated than the dynamics of a family and all the subjective attachments and addictions that are in those relationships. I mean, organizing the cats of your family relationship is likely to be a lot more complicated than recognizing the difference between that Republican turd and the Democrat turd. There is always a dime's worth of difference. One is always a bigger, fatter pile of shit.
Hard. You're going to mess it up, man. For sure.
It sounds so reasonable, doesn't it?
No.
Too bad it's completely wrong. The people throughout history who have made an impact, who have changed the world for better or for worse.
Amazing that he's going down this path. Again, it wasn't chaos that got them there. There's just absolutely no retarded heroes. Functionally retarded. I mean, there was that movie where the Pink Panther guy, Sellers, played some guy who was retarded and everybody thought he was brilliant. But that was a movie. It didn't happen in reality. Okay? You know, Mr. Stinkerstein or whatever the damn movie was. Reality doesn't work that way. The retards actually don't do anything really cool. And again, retard is like chaos. Chaos and retard are the same thing. And so I guess it sort of makes sense that somebody who's a fan of chaos would be a retard. Oh, jeez. See, a little study and you figure out the relationship. See, I didn't figure out that obvious relationship. Of course, retards like chaos, because it's the same as the retard. It's retarded like the retard. It's retard friendly.
Have never done so by cleaning their room, but by messing it up. Remember that angry mob I mentioned in my example of harmful chaos? The throngs of people turning over cars, breaking windows, setting fires, and throwing a massive tantrum? Let me ask you this. What are they saying? Are they saying, we are through with order, and now we want nothing but chaos? No, probably not. What they're saying...
Well, what they're saying is, I'm too stupid to figure out how preposterously self-destructive this is. That it's only going to get the fucking Apache helicopters fired up. It's only going to create a huge amount of resentment that's already the problem for creating the underlying issues of inequality. It's only going to give the guys who hate our guts more reason to say, look, they're hateable. Look at them. Aren't they hateable? I mean, it's completely counterproductive and stupid. So it's a knee-jerk, idiotic, moronic, petty reaction. Do you think the asshole who smashed the guy in the head with the brick in L.A., do you think he did something constructive? He helped the cause? I mean, come on. You couldn't have thrown a more destructive brick.
Saying is, we are tired of the order that exists now, and we demand a new order.
Well, it's not a very smart way to demand. Demand is you send a proposal, you know, you write it down, you make videos, you do something a little more constructive than throwing fucking bricks. Again, the moron throws the hammer, the moron throws the bricks, the moron blows shit up. You're essentially giving now, he's essentially saying terrorists are really smart, you know, because they cause that magical chaos. No, they're really stupid because they just perpetuate hate.
We demand an order more in line with what we want the world to be. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X had very different approaches to the problems faced by black people in America mid-20th century. But one thing they shared in common was they did not care about disrupting the established order. Why would they?
Oh, so again, he's making this into a big complex thing when it was a really simple thing. They're obviously fighting for something dirt simple, which is fairness, right? A good word. And again, a word that doesn't come out of chaos. Fairness isn't built by chaos. Fairness is built by order. And in a sense, they humiliated the culture that existed into recognizing, seeing a portrait of itself and seeing something very ugly and having to concede, yes, change is necessary. And the change was implemented by people who ordered a constructive mechanism to help mitigate against the problem, and it did a lot of substantial good. But a bunch of underlying ignorance is eating it away, is destroying any ability for that fix, that glue, to do the job. And that's really disappointing. And it's completely going to be created by the ignorant chaos, the chaos of ignorance.
It was an order that disadvantaged them for the color of their skin. It was an order that, to them, was evil. It deserved to be disrupted. It deserved to be challenged. The result of their disruption was chaos, unquestionably.
Again, so it's just so stupid. The order of their disruption was chaos. So again, the idea that you can recognize that something's not running right, it's broken, and you apply a fix. The fix isn't chaos. Chaos doesn't fix it. You're saying that chaos can be used. Creating more brokenness can make us aware that it's broken. So that's all he's really saying, right? The thing is broken. The white people didn't hear the broken sounds. They weren't hearing the pistons banging wrong and the valves off center, off time. And so by making the engine work more poorly, blacks essentially were demonstrating that, see, it is broken. Now, can you hear it now? Okay. And that's pretty much how it happened. And now it's necessary that it be fixed. You have to do the squeaky wheel. That's just one of the rules, unfortunately. You have to make the wheel squeak, or all the lazy people say the wheel is fine. Okay? They just don't want to do any complex analysis. So unless it's signaling, you know, using trigger language, doing something annoying, then we won't fix it. So the fact that we have to be annoyed into fixing things is a much more interesting subject than this fucking tripe you're spewing.
Yet, few would look now at their actions and say, well, they both lost their lives in the chaos they created, and many people were hurt, many people were attacked by dogs or with fire hoses, many were jailed, many in the establishment were offended, many in the public were upset or confused, therefore what they did was bad.
Nobody would say that that has any kind of just a tiny bit of education, because clearly if you lived in those times, you the byproduct of those times, well, I mean, I was alive when some of it happened, so you know that it was entirely constructive and the world was going really not so bad. And you know, where the it wasn't a complete inflation of the tire, so to speak, or however you want to blame it, and it's worn over time and it's ripping the tread off, and it's going the wrong way now, and that's bad, and we can recognize it's bad. And the answer is not going to be something grotesquely simple, and the answer is not going to be create more hate, break the thing more, because we're now even a more fragile world, and we can see that fragility in the sense that we have had imbecilically silly wars that are just kind of racially, motivated, if not, I mean, a combination of disconnect that doesn't have any more depth, let's say, than racism.
Most wouldn't now say that because we see in retrospect that what they did produced results. Malcolm X, though a radical, though an extremist, though naive to the point of not knowing what socialism was when asked about it, though a deeply flawed human being, gave black people in America a deeper sense of pride. And many of those who suffered under racist tyranny believed that he addressed their grievances more accurately than did the civil rights activists.
Yes, well, obviously, to have like a good team, Abbott and Costello, they're kind of different characters, right? So yes, one was Abbott to the other one's Costello. Now, which one was Costello and which one was Abbott, I'm not going to say. I mean, religious fraud and whatever the other one was. I mean, sort of religion, Muslim crap. So Christian and Muslim. Okay, yeah, that's not exactly a, that's sort of the odd couple, right? The odd, yeah. So, and to say that that was the optimum way to create change would be kind of silly. You would hope that all you'd need really is the King's speech, judge a man based on the content of his character. Don't profile him based on the color of his skin. He was basically conceding the argument that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people of color, okay, who live in rotten conditions and turn out to be rotten people. But you're not going to get anywhere in this civilization if you blame all the people for what some of the people do. And that don't work, and it's not fair, because somebody over 6 feet was rude to you in the grocery store. Don't blame all of us for that. Just because that fucktard, that big fat one, was a pig and belched on you, don't blame me. I didn't do it.
At the time, who Malcolm found too limited in their approach. Malcolm X at one point described Martin Luther King as a chump and saw the civil rights movement as stooges for the white establishment. As for MLK, it was only days after his assassination that the Civil Rights Act of 1968 was passed.
Well, obviously it had nothing to do with Malcolm X's death, and obviously his death was another big chaos soap opera, right? It didn't have anything to do with the politics that he was fighting for. It had to do with a bunch of egos in his own little club of thieves. So it's a big joke, right? Martin Luther King was killed because he was a civil rights fighter. He was killed because he was a fighter in that war and no other reason. Malcolm X was killed for completely fucked-hearted reasons.
And this was during heavy rioting in reaction to his murder. The discrimination of blacks in America was part of an established order. Martin Luther King
So again, and those riots were completely uncalled for in the sense that it had nothing to do with white hate that killed Malcolm X. So again, you're saying, oh, this reaction, this wrong reaction, this chaotic reaction, this unintelligent reaction was somehow helpful. No, it was almost destructive to the cause, catastrophically destructive. Couldn't have come at a worse time almost. So again, you're making my argument for me that chaos almost killed the baby here. It didn't do anything. This bathwater didn't help.
Disrupted it with chaos. He was eventually assassinated, and this too was chaos. His death produced riots and outrage, more chaos, and then the system reacted with concession, the Civil Rights Act of 1968. And this was a new...
And it was already in process. So again, and you didn't even mention Kennedy, for fuck's sake, having his brains blown out. But he was the architect in a sense, and it was already in process.
New order. So we see chaos giving birth to order, then chaos disrupting that order, then chaos forcing a new order to...
So he's just demonstrating what ignorant, silly people do, is come up with simplistic scapegoats for problems, and simplistic, the Arabs are the problem. Well, it's okay, the Islamicists are the problem. Nothing else is a problem on earth but them things. Simplistic answers to what's the problem, and then simplistic answers to what the solution is. Tip over a car and everything will be fine. Everything will just work out great. So let's tip over some cars and throw some Molotov cocktails and everything will work out just fine. Well, there's lots of people who've done that through history and it hasn't worked out fine. So that's just bullshit.
To emerge. I could write an entire chapter about the lives and the accomplishments of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and their contrasting approaches, but for the purposes of this book, only these facts are important.
And neither one of them was doing something based on chaos. Both of them were strategists. Both of them were planning strategies. They were deliberate acts to create the kind of attention and disruption that would be productive to their ambitions. Chaos was not what they were creating.
1. Both men were malcontents who opposed the established order of their times. 2. Both men disrupted...
They were not breaking the system. So again, you're saying they were breaking a system. They were fixing a system. All right? And maybe sometimes it looks like that. A great painter undoes an awful lot of his painting as he's doing it. There's even for cliches for it, make it before you can break it before you can make it. You got to break it a few times to get it to be right. But this kind of breaking is really careful breaking. It doesn't mean you wipe the whole canvas out. It doesn't mean you smash your hand against the canvas. It means that you have certain things you see that are just not right and they're going to have to start overs. There are little bits that need fixing. So again, this scapegoaty metaphor that this has something to do with being lazy and chaos, when it has everything to do with being very, very careful and very, very thoughtful in how you remake the system, how you make it better, how you improve it. Making improvements is hard, to use a Kennedyism, and that's why we should do it. He wants the easy road.
The established order with their speeches and protests causing great confusion and pandemonium. They used the power of chaos. 3. They changed the world into something more akin to how they thought it ought to be. And they didn't change the world by making sure their rooms were clean and by being respectful to order. They changed the world by causing havoc, disruption, and chaos.
So again, I think that's just more bullshit, because there was a huge motivation, especially among the Muslims, to do the clean up your room part, to do the part where we as black men have to show a better example. So even that's not true. It's really not. They weren't saying, we'll show them that our laziness really works. That wasn't the message being sent. The message being sent was, if you treat us fairly, we'll be a benefit to you. We'll interact with you in a much more graceful and dignified manner. We'll up our game if you up your game. That was the contract.
Their rooms were dirty. Dirty rooms. Now, but TJ,
Idiot.
you're now saying, you've missed the point
Yes.
of Peterson's statement.
Yes.
He wasn't necessarily saying that a person who is opposed to the order of the day cannot work to change it.
So, well, yeah, he is saying that in a sense. He's really saying, don't be bothered with politics because your politics doesn't agree with mine, and I don't want you to get in my way. I think that's what he's saying. He's saying you're too stupid to figure out any of this on your own, and you're taking my advice, so I can assume you're way too dumb to be voting. So please, go clean your room instead of vote. I think that's what he's saying. I think it's terribly to his own purpose. But I wanted to say something relevant to what he just said. Well, you have to wait for another video for it, maybe.
He was essentially saying that a person must have their own life in order before they attempt to start changing the world.
They have to really know what order is. So look, this is just like giving a kid a checkbook when they're a kid. Give them, make them a bank account and teach them the value of money and the fact that if you spend all your money, then you don't make any interest and you don't get everything's very sad and bad. I mean, that doesn't even work nowadays because you can't make interest on a bank account. But when I was a kid, you did, and so it was kind of a thing where it's a learning curve, and you figure out that, hey, yeah, I gotta impulse control, save my money, then I can buy something really cool. If I buy a bunch of cheap crap, it doesn't mean anything. But if I save my money, I can buy a pool table, and that's what I did, and that was really cool. It was really productive for a lot of years, and it was lots of whatever entertainment had. Okay, so those are life lessons, and you have to go through those life lesson process before you're going to be able to take on some bigger thing like buying a car, buying a house, or doing other things. You have to have some knowledge of this whole checkbook thing and how to manage it. But again, if you have to explain that to people in this state, he's talking to adults, he's not talking to fucking 10-year-olds. So that's the really scary part, is that fucking adults are, okay, Daddy, I'm paying attention. Oh, that's really interesting. I can't spend more money than I have in my bank account? This is pitiful.
Well, Martin Luther King Jr. may have been a great champion for civil rights, but he was also a plagiarist who was not at all faithful to his wife. The extent of his plagiarism and his infidelities is
Yes, well, why don't we go through all of those of yours? Let's go through all of your vices. We could just do video after video, couldn't we? Yes, he was like all the great heroes, more show than actual go. But that's the whole poster child thing. Every poster child probably isn't as crippled as they make them look in the picture. The kid all fucked up, and he's like, okay, it's kind of uncomfortably in this position. Can you take the picture? Because, I'm not that crippled. Yes. Poster childery is an obnoxious cheat in our reality, and it should go away.
unknown, but few argue that they didn't happen. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. had said, well, I'm a flawed person. I've done some bad things. My life is not in perfect order, so how can I presume to lecture the world? How can I presume to change the world when I can't even change the bad things about myself?
Oh, again, this is just, I don't even know how this relates in any way, in any real, meaningfully deep way, to the fact that obviously Martin Luther King did do the, did have the social engineering education in terms of being able to be a communicator with people and become articulate and write speeches and do all that stuff. So as much as he plagiarized, the point is he knew how to communicate to people, to motivate them to do something with their lives, and that's why he was the poster child, was because he was good at it. So he clearly already demonstrated his proficiency, so cleaning his room was irrelevant because he already showed himself a good skier, so to speak. He doesn't need to clean his room because it's already accomplished. Peterson is talking about a bunch of little pricks in the world like you who have done nothing of any real hard merit except applaud yourself and say, "Gee, I'm totally handy able." You know, yeah. I'm just a big, huge, fat ball of handy able. No, you're not. Handy capable. The only thing you're capable of doing is bullshitting. Being a poster child for lazy and stupid, which are big sellers among a civilization littered with lazy and stupid. Not hard to, win over the crowd when most of them are as smelly as you are.
Imagine if he'd taken that tact. Maybe black people would still be drinking from the separate water fountains in places like my home state of Louisiana. Maybe they'd still be openly discriminated against in housing and in other areas. We cannot
Yes, we can speculate that the Civil Rights Act was on its way. It was going to eventually happen. It was just part of progression, was the fact that we had huge gaps in fairness still remaining, and any decent person could see it and acknowledge it and say, yes, it's unfair, we gotta fix that. The umpires are cheating. It's clear. They're huge Yankee fans. We can't allow that. We have to fix this law because the law is unfair. Duh.
Speculate as to alternate routes history might have taken since too many variables are present.
Yes.
But it's somewhat safe to say that in the absence of a world-changing man, the world would not have changed. Malcolm X may have...
Okay, again, I just think that's nonsense. Like, slavery would have never ended if it wasn't for Brown or this guy or that guy, all the famous heroes of the time. Yes, it's integral that you have fighters. If no soldiers show up to fight the war, then yes, you lose. That's a given. But the idea that each one has some manifest destiny in the sense that it just won't rewrite the story. We'll win in a different way. Okay, if I change a few of the soldiers in World War II, it won't change whether we win. It just changes how we win, how long it takes to win, or some other kind of thing like that. So clearly there's very important people, but I think it's always a mistake to focus on the poster child and not read the whole book. Okay, I mean, read the poster, read everything about it. Understand that there's more than the poster child that's at stake here.
Of an imparted dignity and a strong belief in the right to self-defense to the black community, but he was also a convicted criminal who spent part of his adolescence in a mental hospital. When he was a member of the Nation of Islam, he was overtly racist, thinking of white people as devils and promoting black supremacy. Later in his life, he softened these stances and disavowed racism and the Nation of Islam, which is probably why 3 of its members riddled him with bullets. The point is...
Yeah, the point is that he wasn't killed in any part for the chaos or the battle against Whitey. But whatever. Maybe this is best done in 3 parts. I'm getting tired of it again. It just doesn't. This is just such an invalid framework for rational conversation about how to solve the problems in the world. I mean, and it's ironic because people, for me, because people typed a comment. Some asshole typed a comment that I'm not offering any solutions when there's tons of them in all my videos. I keep talking about we got to throw the rich overboard. Easy solution. Inheritance is retarded. Let's get rid of it. The substance of it. Everything over a few $1,000,000. It's completely destructive to both any kind of social decency and even capitalism. It breaks capitalism. It breaks the invisible hand. It breaks the evolution of capitalism if you're allowed to keep legacy wealth. It just cheats the entire process. It makes them immune, essentially, to the process of change. I've talked about education. pay the kids, not the teachers. So we're paying teachers these huge salaries when they're really just glorified babysitters. So if you want to hire them as babysitters, then pay them $12 an hour and pay the kids the rest of the money to learn. And you'll radically change the function will be huge in terms of education, and the friction will be tiny. You'll do huge improvements to the capacity of people to gain knowledge quickly, and you'll do almost no destructive damage to any kind of emotional thing or whatever the fear would be. It can't help but work, and no one will listen. No one wants to hear about solutions to problems. They just want to complain and break. And that's the disgustingly pitiful, sad part. And we can fix our democracy by getting rid of these stupid electoral college, get rid of this whole notion that half the people in a district should be, and their representation should be thrown in the garbage. They lose entirely. They're not allowed to have a representative. We call it representative democracy. I've never had a congressman I voted for in my fucking life. How can I possibly say I've been represented in some way when all I've been is screwed out of my representation? I've been told I'm a second-class citizen because I live in a certain district. I don't have any representation. I don't have any democracy that's visible. None whatsoever. We don't have to have a system like that. We should have a system where you have to earn your votes. You have to earn your seat. And every seat will be held by somebody who somebody else voted for. Every voter has somebody they voted for, and that somebody is sitting in the frickin' deciding body. We should have a representative democracy instead of something called a representative democracy, which is an entire lie, because it has nothing to do with democracy, because half the people are unfairly denied their vote. And if you fixed it, they will come. That's the other irony of it. If you fix this democracy, all the people who aren't voting will be voting, because they'll see, yeah, if I vote for that guy, he'll talk my shit in Congress. He'll represent my point of view. So shit, yeah, I'm voting. But we get this two-party crap that's just that. Complete, sellout, special interest crap. So there's just 3 of the solutions, for fuck's sake. But yes, solutions need to be articulated, explained, and defended. Peterson's not doing that. He's just talking in some vague notion that a solution maker has a certain description, and a solution maker is wearing a suit and a tie and has a clean room. That's really fucking retarded. Insanely retarded. Every smart person I've ever known has not given a shit about bullshit. The best engineer I ever saw never combed his hair. He didn't even wash his hair, for fuck's sake. It was just sticking in places, and it was disgusting. And nobody cared, because he spent all his time solving the engineering problems, doing his work. He loved his work, and he did it well. And it just didn't matter that his car was a mess, and this it couldn't have possibly mattered because the work he did was pristine. So yes, Peterson's stupid diagram of reality that messy people make messes is not true. And the idea that your intelligence has to be broad and socially complete to be useful is, again, stupid. So you can be an incredibly flawed person in your personal life and be incredibly productive in your this life. Which is sort of, yes, sort of like me, you know. But anyway, I can talk better than the game I can even play. And but that's still valuable, you know. And it's almost rare for many people. Most people can't talk a better game than they can play. And that's unfortunate. Alright, so we'll do a third one, I guess. Maybe. We'll see how it goes. So, till next time and such.